thank you all for being here. I'm going to start with introductions, and then we're going to get right into our presentations and things in just a few moments here. My name is Kate DeConnick. I teach in the Department of Theology and Religious Studies at the University of San Diego. And along with Dr. Mike Williams, who's also on our call today, I'm one of the co-directors of a group, an initiative on campus that's called the Urgent Challenges Collective. So the collective is an initiative that supports research, teaching, and advocacy that's related to homelessness and food insecurity here in San Diego, which are two of the most pressing crises that we see in the city today and across the county. So today's discussion is part of the Urgent Challenges Collective's Fall 2020 Speaker Series. It is also part of Homelessness and Food Insecurity Action Week here at the University of San Diego. And it's co-sponsored as well with the Center for Catholic Thought and Culture at the University of San Diego, as well as the USD Just Read program for 2020-2021. So we are thrilled to see such great turnout for today's event, and we would invite you also to check out the different websites affiliated with all of the co-sponsors for today to gain access to more resources and find out about other important upcoming events as well. We'll share those links with you in just a short while. Just a reminder that in our session today, we cannot cover all of the details, related to homelessness here in our city. We also can't give a full history of the Catholic worker movement or all of the intricacies of it today. So again, you'll find many helpful resources available on the different websites that will help to supplement our talk today. Okay. In just a minute, I'm going to turn the mic over to Dr. Jeffrey Burns, who's going to provide some general background information for today's event, and he will also introduce our speakers for today. But before we do that, I just wanted to take a minute to share a couple of Zoom etiquette and navigation tips just to make sure we have a smooth session all together today. So since we have a pretty large audience, we're pushing about 50 people right now, we would ask that you please keep your microphone muted, unless you're one of our presenters, obviously. And this will help to minimize the background noise. Also, if you've been on any Zoom calls lately, you might realize that the more videos that we have on, the more that Zoom tends to lag. So we would just ask during the initial presentations at the start of today's event, if you could please keep your videos turned off, that would be helpful. And then when we get to the Q&A portion toward the end, you're more than welcome to turn on your cameras then and kind of interface with our speakers more directly in that way, okay? So after our speakers finish their initial presentations, we will have time for questions and answers. We're gonna try and save at least 15 to 20 minutes of today's event just for that. So if you have a question that you would like to ask the speakers, we would invite you to submit it using our shared Google Doc that we created for today. So in order to access the Google Doc, what you're gonna do is you're gonna go onto the bottom of your Zoom screen. You should see a little button that says chat, and we're gonna drop the link to the Google Doc in that chat area, okay? So when it comes time for the question and answer period, we're gonna pull questions directly off that document in order to ask the speakers, okay? If somebody asks a question that you are also interested in or invested in, you're welcome to put an asterisk next to that question. And this will tell us that there is a lot of interest in that question, and it will kind of amplify that question, move it up on the list, okay? So that's everything that I wanted to share. Today's event will also be recorded and shared with those who are registered for the event for today. So there's no need to take extensive notes. We will share the link with you as soon as it's available. We just want you to enjoy the session today, okay? So I will put the link to the Google Doc in the chat right now. And in the meantime, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Jeffrey Burns from the Center for Catholic Thought and Culture, who's going to take things from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. As Kate mentioned, I'm Jeffrey Burns, the director of the Harp Center for Catholic Thought and Culture here on campus, and we promote discussion on Catholic issues, Catholic culture, Catholic intellectual tradition, and various things of that nature. But I'm so delighted today to be participating in the discussion about Dorothy Day and the Catholic worker movement, and then its application here in San Diego. As many of you might have had the chance of seeing the movie that is available if you haven't seen it yet, called Dorothy Day, Don't Call Me a Saint. And that's become kind of a controversy of sorts of whether we should be working to canonize Dorothy Day or not. But I'll leave that for you people to discuss. Dorothy Day was born in 1897, and she lived a very radical life. She was not a Catholic, but in the 1920s, she gave birth to a child, and this moved her to convert to the Catholic faith. And when she converted, she thought she was going to have to give up her radical stances. And so she prayed that God would open up some way for her, that she could use the background that she had in radical organizing. And as it turned out, a Frenchman by the name of Peter Marin came with a philosophy of Catholic social action that was captured in this phrase that we need to blow the dynamite of the Catholic social teaching and just transform the world. And so together they established the Catholic Worker Movement in 1933 in New York City. And it spread across the country from that point on, still continues all across the country. The basic thrust is serving the poor, which Peter Marin would call the poor the ambassadors of God. And so in terms of what we're talking about today, in the terms of homelessness, we have this tremendous respect for all God's brothers and sisters. And so today we're going to meet with a couple of people, 3 people that have been involved with the San Diego Catholic Worker. We first have Nancy Green, who's a longtime San Diego Catholic Worker. Tom Reefer, a professor of sociology here at the University of San Diego, has also worked with the Los Angeles Catholic Worker and the San Diego Catholic Worker. Then we have the current president of the San Diego Catholic Worker, Jim Thomas. So I'm going to turn it over to Nancy to get us started. So Nancy?
I'm ready. Yeah. Well, hi, everyone. First of all, I want to make sure that you understand that there is nothing unique or special about me. I'm just, like your ordinary person who lives and works and loves and laughs and does all those things. But the reason I want to share my story is so that I can connect with you all, because that's precisely what Dorothy Day did for me. She made, her life made a connection with me that I discovered kind of paralleled my life. And so let me tell you about that. I was born in 1933 during or toward the end of the Depression. Franklin Roosevelt was the president, and actually it was kind of the year, it was a year that Dorothy Day met Peter Marin. I was born in Sioux City, Iowa, and so there was this Midwestern mentality, and I was born into this wonderful German, both sides, family, but my family was extremely dysfunctional. And so grandmother stepped in and played a big role in that. When I was 12 years old, I decided that I was going to have to go life on my own, because parents had kind of walked out and things were, as I said, dysfunctional. And so I felt very lonely, and I decided that because I was going to have to go life on my own terms, I needed someone who would not turn his or her back on me. And I believed that that was God. And so I had this wonderful encounter with God. And at the same time, we were living in the Mojave Desert, and there was a family that was Catholic, and I attached myself to them. I was alone with my father, who traveled a great deal. So I started going to church with them. They were Catholic, and I just found so many things about the religion, and my sense of God was going to take care of me. And I haven't lost that. It's been my grounding for the rest of my life. Well, that was a long time ago. So then if you fast forward to the 1960s, I'm living in Northern California in Marin County, and I'm the mother of 7 children. And my wonderful husband is a Catholic, and don't ask me where I found it, but a copy of the New York Catholic Worker fell into my hands, and I started reading about it, and I read every issue, and at that time, I'll tell you, every penny counted, and I sent away for a subscription to the New York Catholic Worker. I didn't know any Catholic workers, but I knew that that was where that was my future, and I believed it very strongly. Then I read Thomas Merton's autobiography, and I read Dorothy Day's The Long Loneliness, her autobiography, and she titled it with that word that meant so much to me. And I'll tell you, when I made that connection with Dorothy Day and the Catholic Worker, I've been dedicated ever since. Dorothy Day, I believe that she and I had so much in common. And so through the Beatitudes and the works of mercy, and my husband, we talked about, we dreamed that we would join the Peace Corps as we grew older, and that would be our major contribution. We'd get all these 7 kids raised, and we would do wonderful things. Unfortunately, in his 40s, he died. And so years later, I married another man. We ended up in San Diego. And guess what we found? The San Diego Catholic Worker. We met Jane Emerson, we met Tina, so many beautiful, wonderful people doing so much work. So that was in 1985. And we came to San Diego, and we've been doing work in the Catholic Worker ever since. So that's my story, and I'm hoping that you who are listening can dig deeply into your own life and find what Catholic Worker can do for you. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Nancy. We'll follow up with you with some questions at the end, so don't go anywhere. So now we'll turn it over to Tom Reefer. So Tom?
Thank you. By the way, the students like to say Reefer, but it's Rifer.
Rifer, sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I don't mind. So I'll just talk maybe for a few minutes, and it's nice to be here with my friends, Nancy and Jeff, but I don't really feel I deserve to be on the same stage with them because they're real Catholic workers. I'm just an aspirant. But I'll tell you a little bit of a story of how I came to the Catholic Worker and its meaning for me. So I was actually born in Spanish Harlem, and my parents were heroin addicts. And when I was about 18 months old, the police came to the door and my parents left over the rooftops. And I guess before I came out to California, I was taken care of by Catholic nuns. So that was my first meeting of Catholics, which I suppose had a long-term effect on me. And I was raised in Orange County, as we call it, behind the Orange Curtain. And I was raised in a house in which the only constancy was really violence. And when I was 13 years old, I got up the courage finally to run away from home. And after I'd been gone for about a year, I was in a group home for a while, but they basically kicked me out because they wanted me to go back home. And I told them I didn't want to go home because of what was happening there. But I guess they didn't really believe me or didn't care. So I went out and I think I met somebody that gave me, $5. And at the time, my plan was I thought it was a great plan. I don't know if you know those candy corns you get for Halloween, but I thought, well, I'm going to buy a bag of those and I'll eat one a day. I guess they're like 99.9% sugar. Anyway, after about a year, I met my sister Jane, and she was working for the Nuclear Weapons Freeze with the Alliance for Survival. And this was a time when the nuclear weapons freeze and the anti-nuclear movement worked very closely with the Catholic worker. And I met the Catholic workers in Los Angeles, where I stayed for a while. And I was really just kind of awestruck, because one of the things that Robert Ellsberg, I believe, says in his edited book called By Little and Little, The Selected Writings of Dorothy Day. He says the thing about Dorothy was not so much what she did, or not so much what she said, but the fact that there was no difference between what she did and what she said, And it's funny because I'm a sociologist now, despite never having graduated from high school. And the topic of runaways and homeless kids used to be a big topic in sociology, but not so much anymore. Interestingly enough, there's a fascinating book by a woman, Gitta Sereny, who studied children that had been kind of abandoned during the Holocaust. Later, she did a big study of Albert Speer, Hitler's munitions minister. But she actually wrote one of the best books about runaway children, called The Invisible Children, The Shattering Tragedy of the Runaways on Our Streets. And I just want to read a few passages and then go back to Dorothy. She says, some children are driven from their homes by sheer brutality. And then she goes on to say, the reasons for parental failure are various, but the consequences for children are always the same. Defeated by the loneliness of their decision to run and stay away, they feel valueless as children in a world of adults who cannot help them, and valueless as sons or daughters of parents whose lives they are convinced they hinder rather than enrich. Their value as children, their right to be protected, having been taken away from them, they feel worthless as human beings. So we have come almost full circle. We are forced to admit that the prevention of family-child breakdown may be impossible. There will always be individual parents who fail and children who can no longer tolerate that failure. There will always be runaway children who cannot return home. What need not always be the case is that they must turn to prostitution in order to survive. And what she talks about the consequences of our unwillingness to admit this basic reality, that some children for various reasons can't live with their parents. And she ends the book with the following paragraph. To allow men to use children with impunity and to ignore the children as though they were invisible seems to me to be indefensible. Do you think anyone cares, Cassie asked me? A justifiably bitter question I was to hear time and time again from these young victims. For victims they are. No child in prostitution wants to be a prostitute. They long to be wanted as children. They long to be loved. They long to be children. Well, when I met the Catholic worker, I finally met, for me, adults who actually cared, who were willing to face the truth, not just of poverty and homelessness, but the realities of the society that led to poverty and homelessness. In the postscript of Dorothy Day's The Long Loneliness, she talks about the discussions that people have about the Catholic worker, which are meaningful to me because I guess I have a feeling that, like the bishop in Les Miserables and his compassion for a criminal and a thief, as I was, Jean Valjean, he showed Jean Valjean this elementary kindness. And even though Jean Valjean didn't show it in return because he stole from the bishop, when the gendarmes came back with Jean Valjean and said, this person says that you gave him these things, but he obviously stole them. And the bishop said, no, I gave them to him. And then he said, but I'm very angry with you, Jean Valjean. Why didn't you accept the candlesticks I gave you? And then he turns to Jean Valjean and he says, Jean Valjean, with these candlesticks, I ransom you from fear and hatred, and I give you to God. You have promised me to become a good man. Of course, Jean Valjean didn't remember making any such promise, but that love from the bishop allowed him to transform his life. And that brings me to the final part of what I'm going to say, final few parts, which is that in the postscript to The Long Loneliness, Dorothy Day talks about what people say is the most significant thing about the Catholic worker. The most significant thing about the Catholic worker is poverty, some say. The most significant thing is community, others say. We are not alone anymore. But the final word is love. At times it has been, in the words of Father Zosima, a harsh and dreadful thing, and our very faith in love has been tried through fire. We cannot love God unless we love each other, and to love we must know each other. We know him in the breaking of the bread, and we know each other in the making of the bread, and we are not alone anymore. Heaven is a banquet, and life is a banquet too, even with a crust when there is companionship. We have all known the long loneliness, and we have learned that the only solution of love, and that love comes with community. In another part of The Long Loneliness, she says something that I feel very much to myself, in the presence of Nancy and Dennis, who are the true Catholic workers and who do most of the work. I just do little things. But Dorothy Day says the following: I feel that I have done nothing well, but I have done what I could. And so I hope that little story will just tell you about some of the dimensions of homelessness that we don't hear about and we don't read about, and how organizations of people like the Catholic worker have transformed the lives of people and allowed them to continue on with a life of love instead of hate, exactly because they embrace the works of Christ and they embrace the love for others and the non-judgmentalness. And that's what I see in my friends Nancy, and above all, in my friend Jim. And I just want to thank them for the hard work that they do.
Thank you very much, Tom. That was great. And as I said, we'll continue with some questions a little bit later, but now we'll turn it over to Jim and the current Catholic worker in San Diego. So Jim?
I am a product of a Catholic upbringing. Went through life up until about 10 years ago, just sort of getting by. At that point, my wife and I discussed what we were going to do when we retired, and ended up thinking that volunteering was going to be in our future. I had no idea where or how. I was at Mass at St. Joseph's Cathedral one Sunday, and the celebrant was Father Gil Gentile, who mentioned in his homily that he was cooking spaghetti for a dinner that next Friday night, and invited everybody to show up. I felt like a spaghetti dinner cooked by an Italian priest was going to be a pretty good thing. So my wife and I went. We liked what we saw. We decided to get a little more involved. I came to a board meeting later that month, and I kind of got hooked. I found out about a Friday lunch that took place every Friday in Pacific Beach. Went out there the next week, and it was like a fish being caught. You see the lure and you kind of follow the lure and then you're hooked. And that's what happened to me. I got to know a lot of very interesting people, particularly 4 or 5 Jesuit priests, Father Gentile being one of them, Father Steve Kelly, who I met at a Catholic worker meeting in Las Vegas, who's now in jail. I find that following the stories of some of these people, some of the more interesting people have spent some time in jail. Dan Berrigan, for instance. I don't have quite that level of commitment, but what we're doing now with the Catholic worker in San Diego is feeding people. Homelessness, we know, is a pervasive problem. And I have people tell me from time to time that, you know, what you're doing is not solving the homeless problem. I don't know that I'm capable of solving the homeless problem, but what I am capable of doing is solving this guy's problem that's in front of me who doesn't have anything to eat for dinner. It's on a much more visceral level than others, but with the group of people that we have, we are getting food into people's mouths. I know it's only one facet of what Dorothy Day believed in and what she wanted to do, but it's a worthwhile one. And one of the things that I've learned there that I really come back to all the time is giving somebody a meal is almost equally important as looking him in the eye and saying hi, just recognizing the humanity of each of these people. And they don't have that. Other than other homeless people, other people in their community, their relationships tend to be with police, with people who would like to forget that they exist, who want to sweep them under the carpet, and looking them in the eye, saying hi, recognizing them as human beings is, I think, as important to them as giving them a bowl of soup and a sandwich. Let me backtrack. So 6 years ago, I was elected president of the San Diego Catholic Worker. Every Catholic worker organization is different. We are structured in a somewhat hierarchical way because we need to be a corporation, because we have what the IRS calls a 501c3 number, which means we can accept money and we can give the people that donate to us a letter to write off on their taxes. Other Catholic workers, frankly, look down on us because we have gone to the extent of doing this. But every Catholic worker, as I say, is different. We do what we're capable of doing with what we have. We accomplish, I feel like when we get home from working on Wednesday or Friday handing out food, I feel like we've accomplished a lot. In the overall sense of things, we haven't accomplished that much. But as I say, we have given those people something to eat that day. And that's a start. The presidency is something that we have to do because we have to be incorporated, because we have to be incorporated to have a 501c3 number. But it's not in any sense of the word a hierarchy. There are 7 or 8 or 9 people that sit on the board, and the decisions are frequently unanimous, not necessarily always, but we try to run it in a non-hierarchical way, I guess would be the way to put it. Just a quick story about this. The president who preceded me, Tina DiStefano, often said that she became the president when she was at a Catholic worker board meeting and got up to go to the bathroom, and by the time she came back, they'd elected her president. Tina was not quite that subtle. She told me I was going to be the next president when it was time for her to retire. I learned an awful lot from her. I miss her. That was, knowing Tina DiStefano was an education. That's about it. I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. It reminds me of Dorothy Day talking about the starting of the first House of Hospitality. She said that a person came to her that was hungry and she couldn't just say to them, "Go thou be filled." She had to feed them. And that's how it all started, just a simple request and a simple reaction to that need. So thank you very much for that. So thanks to our 3 speakers. I'm going to turn it over to Kate now to address us some questions from our audience now. So Kate, you want to take it?
Yeah, thank you so much. What a rich, set of presentations for us to all talk about and kind of delve into in a deeper way together. So thank you all for setting the stage for what's to come here. For those of you who might have come in a little bit late, I just put in the chat the link to the Google Doc that we're using to moderate the questions and answers for today. So you can take a look at the questions that have already been posed. If there's one that you're interested in, you could put a little asterisk next to it so we know there's a lot of interest there. And then actually Mike Williams, who's the co-director with me of the Urgent Challenges Collective, he's going to pick out some of the questions based on the interest level. And we'll try and hit as many questions as we can with the 25 minutes that we have left today. So we have plenty of time to talk things through. And if you would like to turn on your camera at this point, you're welcome to. There's no pressure to do so if you need a break for your eyes and you don't want to stare at your screen. But thank you for keeping those off while we had our initial presentations. We appreciate that.
Yeah, we have some really good questions. Some of them are directed for all of you and some of them individually. I think the one we're going to start with is for all of you. And it's this. It's a 3-part question. If Dorothy Day were alive today, what actions do you think she would be taking in the midst of the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement? Is the Catholic worker movement today heavily involved in responses to these issues? And I think anyone on the panel can just, go and we'll just kind of go through and hear what you have to say.
Well, I just want to make one comment that right from the start, Dorothy Day was very concerned about the race issue. On the banner of the Catholic worker, the masthead, there's a very dramatic image that has a white worker and a black worker both shaking hands and being embraced by Jesus. And so it gives a very powerful interracial issue. And that was from the mid-1930s, so even more radical at the time. So I'm sure she'd have a lot to say about what's going on today.
Well, I feel certain she would definitely be standing up to all of these injustices that we see. So definitely she would be right in the thick of it. The second question, could you repeat it, please?
Sorry, I'm mute and the different windows. Yes, I can definitely repeat it. The second part of that question is, how would Dorothy Day, what would she be doing in the midst of the pandemic, the Black Lives Matter movement, and is the Catholic worker movement today involved with these issues?
Okay, well, I did answer the first one, and I would say she would be in the forefront of it all, no doubt about it. And so for the second question, someone else may want to answer.
Well, I think she would be involved with the pandemic because it affects the poor and homeless so dramatically. And that would be something that she would be working very intimately with.
She probably would have taken on every person of the administration that she would verbally be making statements and taking them on at their respective levels, no doubt about it. She was a fighter, and she was a person who may have been known for her words, but mostly for her actions. You see her with the police. The picture of her marching. So many images of her. No doubt about it. She would be in the forefront.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the part of the video, Don't Call Me a Saint, right? Where you see her going to participate with the United Farm Workers and supporting Cesar Chavez and, you know, all of these different issues across the country. I really feel like she'd be someone who we'd be seeing in the news all the time were she still with us today. So thank you for that. I think that's really useful perspective, Nancy.
If I could add something about the farm workers thing. As I said before, I was living in Northern California in the 60s during this, and I made it a mandate in our house that we would not have grapes. And finally, the children, we would go to the grocery store and Mom, let's have some grapes. No, we can't have grapes. We can't have grapes. Finally, one of the children said to me, Mom, will we ever be able to have grapes again? And I said, yes, we will once Dorothy Day reaches her point of view for everyone. But yeah, those were deadly times, really.
Yeah, and that relates to another question that, the first question was about the present, and this one, Nancy, is I think directed to you at first, but I'd love to hear what Tom and Jim think as well. Given that you mentioned that you grew up during the end of the Great Depression, what are the conditions? Do the conditions today, are they similar at all to what you grew up with? Do you think it's changed a lot or not?
Well, for me, I was a child, so I was not in the capacity that as an adult that I have now with being able to think adult thoughts and seeing what's happening. However, the effect on families and on children, I've spent my life as a teacher, and the effects on children I see is in a different way as great.
I think it's also just worth noting there was one comment that was directed toward Tom in the document as well, which connects with what Nancy is saying here. Just kind of thanking you, Tom. It wasn't a question, but just thanking you for highlighting this aspect of youth homelessness, which we don't tend to really talk as much about in our culture. And, you know, the different reasons for why people might become unsheltered or housing insecure. There tends to be certain stereotypes of, you know, who unsheltered people are. And I think what this person is expressing is just gratitude for your kind of making it more complex when we think about how people end up, you know, in the situations that they find themselves in. So I just wanted to share that and bring that to light as well.
Thank you. I would like to say one thing about that, since we're here at Catholic University, and I think we progressed a little bit, but for a while I've had to combat, I think, a tendency sometimes among Catholics, sometimes the religious people, to talk about the family as if that's automatically good, and especially, you know, heterosexual families is good. And that really, really bothers me. There is a written by gay and lesbian families. It just says love makes a family. And I think whatever people's view on issues of sexuality or something like that, one of the central elements that got me really to love the Catholic worker is our critique of violence. And I think that when we look at the United States and when we look at the world today, that is one of the most important things. How do we change the world and do so through nonviolent resistance, you know? So when we talk about families, we really have to say, you know, why is it that if somebody, you know, punches somebody and they're an adult, they get convicted of an assault, but somehow we think that's acceptable to do to children, or that even if that's done, that the natural thing is to reunite them with the family. Shouldn't there be some basic elements of human dignity that children have to enjoy, you know? So I found that sensibility, you know, really in the Catholic worker. And that's the thing I found so transformative about it. And what Jim was talking about in terms of that basic element of human dignity, social psychologists talk about the most important things humans have a need for is a sense of belonging. Unfortunately, that sense of belonging can be responded to by fascist movements, as we saw in Germany in the 1930s. I was just reading in a biography of Dietrich Bonhoeffer that Nazi Germany was one of the most popular tyrannical regimes in history. And what the Catholic worker offers is a sense of belonging and a sense of religious ethics, not in terms of simply belonging, but in terms of service to others, service to people who are suffering, service to people that are maligned and attacked. And that is where I think the heart of the Catholic worker and the heart of the church and religious love should be. And it's certainly one of the things that converted me to believe in the possibilities of humanity and even in adults, despite my former experiences.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tom. There's a question in here that for Jim, and it's just asking for more details about this program you have for feeding those who are experiencing homelessness. And is this still happening now, given the COVID crisis? And what are the ways that faculty, staff, or students from USD could be involved in this effort?
Okay, yeah, it's still happening. We modified it to a great extent. The Friday lunch used to be a sit-down lunch. People would come into the church hall at Christ Lutheran Church in Pacific Beach, sit down. We would serve them soup, salad, a full meal, dessert, and coffee. And we don't do that anymore because of the intense contact that goes on. We're giving them sack lunches now. And I'm sorry that we have to do that, because again, getting back to what I said before, the social contact was really important to that. The ability for these people to sit down and relate to one another, relate to the people that were serving them the food. And now it's a lot more assembly line cafeteria style. We hand them a sack lunch and say, we'll see you next week. The meal that we do on Wednesday afternoon consists of chicken soup and sandwiches. We used to distribute this on the street, and that was really an experience. I think that's where I learned about talking to people more than anything else. We'd drive around, park our car on 17th and Island, and within 10 minutes, we'd have a line of 40 people, and we'd hand out a cup of soup and sandwiches to them. Again, we don't do that anymore. We now make sack lunches, and we take them to a couple of parking lots where homeless people are allowed to congregate if they have a car, and the people that run the parking lots distribute the meals. This is a response to COVID. It's just, you know, unfortunately, demographically, the San Diego Catholic worker is old. I can't think of a nice euphemism for that. When I got involved with it, I was 65 years old, and I lowered the average age of the board members. So
Yeah.
so we're still doing it now. As far as volunteers, we would welcome them. I think initially we do preparation of the food on Wednesday afternoon at the Parish Hall of Our Lady of Guadalupe in the barrio. I think if I can run off the top of my head, the address of that is 1770 Kearney Street in Barrio Logan. If anybody is interested in coming by, they'd be more than welcome. We always are interested in having people help. And particularly based on the comment I made earlier about the demographic, if you're under 35, please come by. We need some young people.
Jimmy,
Yeah,
I think you want to also tell the people about the clothing distributions that we do as well.
okay, we do clothing distributions. I ran into an interesting situation yesterday. We have a number of people who donate clothes. Based on requests, we put together a couple of bags of clothes that we were taking to the parking lots yesterday. One of the parking lots accepted the bags of clothes very happily. The other one said they couldn't take them because of COVID. That really kind of surprised me. Why can they take food that we prepared and serve that to people, but not take clothing? So we're going to continue to deliver the clothes to the parking lot that will take them.
Okay.
They used to be distributed at Lutheran Church downtown. You've heard me refer to a couple of Lutheran churches. The Catholic Worker obviously is not exclusively Catholic. We're pretty ecumenical about it. But the clothing distribution is something that is sort of on hold right now because the church on 3rd Street downtown, 3rd Avenue downtown, suspended all their operations for the duration of COVID. We're not doing as much of that as we would like, but it's still in existence.
In response to the question that was stated, I would like to remind everyone that social justice is one of our main components and what we feel very, very strongly about. So if we have some young people who can join and bring about change in our social situation, we'd surely welcome them.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. I was just thinking, just as a side comment, we have many students in our room today who are taking a course with Dr. Williams and I about the kind of homelessness crisis here in the US and kind of in San Diego in particular. And we've been learning about the key principles of Catholic social teaching together as part of this course as well. And I was just thinking about how some of the comments that you've all been making really resonate with some of those core themes, with the preferential option for the poor, with the focus on human dignity and the idea that everyone is made in the image of God, right? So I just wanted to kind of elevate that a little bit and draw it out of what you were saying, because I think it's really relevant and helpful here. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's a question about what. It's wonderful, all the programs and the volunteering, but there's a question about what do we need to do as a society to kind of structurally get at these issues of either homelessness or racism. I mean, surely these are not issues that the Catholic worker can solve, but what can we be doing through the Catholic worker or through other organizations to get at these more institutional changes that need to be made?
Get people to vote. Really, November 3rd is of paramount importance. I believe it's still within the parameters to be able to register. Get people to register, get people to vote. Highly, highly important. This is a critical election.
I agree with Jim, but I'd also like to say a few related things. One of the leading figures in the Catholic worker who influenced me a lot is a man by the name of Ammon Hennessy. And Ammon Hennessy used to talk about the one-man revolution. He said, the only revolution that's coming. And one of the important things about the Catholic worker is that they don't look to government in and of themselves. They look to themselves and they look to other people. And they embrace voluntary poverty, but they critique institutionalized poverty. And one major aspect is that we spend about $1 trillion, $600 billion to $1 trillion a year on figuring out better and more effective ways to kill people. Some of those hospital ships that were in the Navy got used in the coronavirus. But one of the things that we're confronting right now, and somebody brought up the Depression in the 1930s, except there's one big difference in the United States, and that difference is FDR versus Donald Trump. Right now, humanity is using a lot of its energy in a path of self-destruction. There was an article in the paper yesterday, and it had a quote from a climate scientist who said, you know, we climate scientists have pretty much put everything out there. It's now for the social scientists to get into the game. In other words, why aren't people acting? But I think what we really have to do is that we really have to look at this ethic of nonviolent change. And we have to look at the immense amount of money that we spend on killing people rather than taking care of people. One of the most significant things about the Catholic worker is they don't consider what they do charity. It's an act of solidarity, and simultaneously, they don't stop at just acts of mercy. They're trying to change the entire world and society through changing themselves to making it so that the Catholic worker, in a certain sense, can be put out of business, because we all live as part of the mystical body of Christ, or whoever you consider, in terms of our neighbor becomes more important to us than ourselves. As Peter Marin said, people would be better off if people stopped trying to be better off and became better.
Well said.
Oh, Nancy, I think you're on mute.
I would like to add that I hold education responsible for missing the boat on making certain that this part of educating young people is so important. You know, we've fallen down on educating on civics. We've fallen down on the social, although I must say, I find that socially, the universities are trying very hard and doing a great job of it. So it's a slow process that needs to take place, because the young people I talk to are so eager to get involved. You've done a great job in education for that. And so we've got to give them the meat to chew on.
Yeah, thank you for that, Nancy. It's not for lack of trying. I think I can speak for a lot of my colleagues, but I think you raise a really good point, and all of you did. And Tom, thank you for lifting up the idea of how an individual can themselves be part of the institutional change by doing better. Thank you for that. We're getting time, I think, for one more question. And I wanted to see if Jeffrey wanted to chime in, if you had any final questions or thoughts, Jeffrey.
I would just like to ask our three panelists if they had one thing they want people to remember about the Catholic worker movement, what would it be?
Well, for me, I'll speak very briefly. It's love. Love is the basis of everything that we do. Our community is just a community just bursting with love. And so one word answer, love.
Amen.
I agree.
I'll add a little twist to that.
Okay.
Because, although I agree, because when I was growing up, strangely enough, when I was 11, I read The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky, and it was one of Dorothy's favorite books. And as Robert Cole said, you know, Dorothy came to literature not in some academic sense because she wanted to find out a way to live. And there's a wonderful story that I was just rereading yesterday in Fyodor Dostoevsky called A Lady of Little Faith. And it's about this woman who goes to Father Zosima. And she says, you know, I so much want to love humanity. I so much want to help humanity. But all these individual human beings just get in the way, you know. And he talked about how, you know, these people said, you know, I really want to help humanity, but when I'm around people, I just can't stand anybody, you know. But he says something very important. This is Father Zosima. And it's funny because I later wrote about this in the Southern Cross, and they said, who's Father Zosima? I said, actually, he's a person in Dostoevsky. But Dostoevsky, Dorothy Day, in her final postscript, she says, at times it has been, in the words of Father Zosima, a harsh and dreadful thing. And in the Dostoevsky Brothers Karamazov, he talks about it to this woman, because when we talk about love, that's what we talk about. He says, I am sorry I can say nothing more consoling to you, for love in action is a harsh and dreadful thing compared with love in dreams. When you go to people that are homeless, that have been broken, that have been cast out, and people who maybe because they haven't had a shower for a long time and you can smell the stench and maybe aren't very happy with you or whatever, that love is a harsh and dreadful thing. It might not be easy to love, and it might not be able to easy to love each other. But the Catholic worker calls upon us for a love that we know is a harsh and dreadful thing, and to love anyway. And so the final word is love, but that love can sometimes be a harsh and dreadful thing.
I'd like to add one thing, if I may. We do publish a newspaper in the tradition of the New York and the original Dorothy Day, Peter Morin newspaper. So we should, this is incumbent upon me, we should put more issues at USD so that all you students can read them, and that would be great. We'd look forward to hearing from you in the newspapers as well.
Great.
Wonderful. Well, yeah, we are just about at time for today, but I just wanted to pause and, you know, say thank you once again for such a rich conversation and so many wonderful perspectives from our speakers for today. This has been, for me, just, you know, I've learned new things today, so thank you. And, you know, I was just looking at our audience list from today, and we've had students, faculty, staff, administrators, community members, service providers. We have some folks with lived experience of homelessness who are here with us today as well. So I think what I'm hearing just from some private messages I've been receiving, that everyone is taking meaningful things away from this in one way or another. So thank you all for this.